Welcome once again to the Ramen. This is episode 20. I know we said last time that it was actually episode 20, but it wasn't. It was episode 19. Apparently, we lost the ability to count, but I've corrected that, and this is actually episode 20. And tonight, our guest is Amanda Metzkes, who's vice president of a half a dozen different things, supposedly rumor has it, and is also running Camp Quest. And that's what she's going to be talking about with us today. Mark, do we have any sponsors or promotionals or anything else we need to hear about?
Yeah, there is 1 hour left on the auction that Be Secular is hosting for the Hotline Project, the free, anonymous, toll-free number that people who are struggling with doubt and in maybe a dangerous situation or just really need somebody to talk to, they can call the number. It's sponsored by Recovering from Religion. They're the ones running it. The auction is at biddingforgood.com/hotline. There's a Steven Tyler autographed guitar, tickets to the American Music Awards, spend a weekend for 2 as an astronaut, a Jack Nicholson signed photograph, a bunch of cool items. And there's also a Be Secular shirt that was signed by about 50 different activists and personalities in the community that's available. The bidding for that is up to $150 right now. So if you're watching this live, go to biddingforgood.com/hotline and bid on an item. 100% of the proceeds go to the Hotline Project.
Okay, and I don't understand what people struggling with doubt. I mean, how do you help people? I have an idea. You just play part of the game. I mean, when somebody's telling you their religious mumbo jumbo, or talking about homeopathy or their spiritual healing or their herbalism or whatever, just raise one eyebrow. Just practice this. That'll help you right along your way. People get the idea. So, Amanda, what can you tell us about Camp Quest?
So many things, but starting out with the basics, Camp Quest is about fun, friends, and free thought. We're a network of summer camps across the U.S. for kids ages 8 to 17. We're aimed at kids from secular families. We do all the typical fun summer camp stuff, plus critical thinking challenges, world religions, ethical dilemmas, humanist values, science experiments, and making friends with other kids from secular background.
Science experiments. What kind of things do you do there?
Sure. So we do things like building towers out of pieces of spaghetti. I guess that's maybe more of an engineering challenge than a science experiment. We play some evolution games to see who is more adapted to eat different things and survive in the population.
Wait, I just want to savor this for a moment. We're going to invite people to send their kids to camp where you're going to experiment with whether they can eat different things and survive.
Yes.
and it's an evolutionary experiment, is it?
Pro tip, marbles, you can't.
No, don't eat marbles.
If it was already dead when you found it, don't eat it.
Right.
We're probably wise.
Okay, so is there the interaction with nature? What do you got there?
Absolutely. So we also do a lot of nature hikes. We do some fun things like we did an activity a couple of years ago in Ohio. We have this pond on our campground, and so we collected water samples. We looked at them under the microscope. But before we did that, we made some hypotheses about what things we should expect to see in the water if the pond is healthy versus unhealthy. So we learned about what species are really robust to different environmental conditions and what species are more sensitive. And, so we could make some hypotheses about, well, if the sensitive species are present or not, that gives us information about how the pond ecosystem is doing. So those are some of the things that we do.
All right. Do you know about Camp Quest Texas? How that varies, or anything specific about that group?
Well, absolutely. I know that they have around 100 campers, which is huge. It's one of our largest locations. The specific science activities that they do, I know, vary from year to year. I don't know what is on deck exactly for this summer, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome. But yeah, a lot of it depends on who the volunteers are who come to camp in a particular year, because we really like to take advantage of the expertise of our volunteer leaders. So if we have someone come to camp who is a biology professor, They may lead an activity about. We had an activity about salamandering in Smoky Mountains National Park, where we went and we found salamanders and learned about them. If we have someone who's a physicist or an astronomer, we'll get out telescopes at night and look at Saturn through the telescope. So it just kind of depends on who you got and what they know. But I promise it'll be fun and interactive.
Okay. Now, see, I remember there's a particular type of salamander in Minnesota that has a ridiculous toxicity level that is higher than any of the poison dart frogs.
Wow.
And perfectly safe if you handle it with your hands, unless you lick your fingers afterwards, because it has enough poison on its skin to kill 100 men. So I'm guessing that when you're picking up wildlife like that, there are people there that are wise enough to tell you, don't lick this particular salamander.
Absolutely. So don't lick the wildlife. Generally, a good watch out. Anywhere you are. But also, like, another thing we like to be really careful of when we're doing something like salamandering is teaching the kids a way to do that where they're not going to harm the animals. So how to properly, turn over rocks carefully, kind of guide the salamanders into a little bucket with some water. Release them very soon after that, but being careful to observe and not destroy.
Okay, so when we met at the American Atheist National Convention a couple of weeks ago in Memphis, and I had just gotten back from Australia at that time, and I saw this notice that what's his name, Dr. Moore. Yeah, Zach Moore, who had been previous competitions with us in years earlier, where me and Dillahunty and like Dogma Debate and Zach Moore would have competitions with each other to try to raise more money for Camp Quest. And when he posted something that he said that he had beaten us, and I got really confused at that because I didn't even know there was a competition going on. I was out of the country. Apparently he was talking about having beaten previous records since we were unavailable. When I saw the message, I thought that there was a competition going on right now, and that I'd somehow already lost without even knowing that it was going on. I was really happy that last year that there was a record turnout, and they showed the picture of all the kids assembled for this thing, where the huge Camp Quest tower, I guess it was. What facility do you use here?
In Texas, it's in Hunt, Texas, and it's a YMCA camp. It's called Camp Flaming Arrow.
Well, that's appropriate, isn't it? Equal time, YMCA. I can't remember what that stands for, but I don't like it.
It's really interesting. We, in Camp Quest history, have had many different experiences with YMCAs. We used to rent from a YMCA camp in Ohio, and we had a great relationship with them for years, and then they had a staff change, and we got a really nice article, actually, in the New York Times, and all of a sudden they didn't want us back. And so we actually had to go find a new campground because, they were like, well, we don't really want to be renting to you because you have different values than we do. And I told the woman on the phone, I said, your values, I was at their campground at the time, and I was looking at the wall, the climbing wall, and it had their values: caring, responsibility, respect, and honesty. And so I just quoted those 4 values at her, and I said, we have those exact same values. We get to them from a different place that you do, but we share those values 100%. And she didn't really have a response.
Well, I would argue that there's some issue with those values when, in my opinion now, when they're talking about honesty, not so much. Not when they're like I said, here in Texas, where they're pushing creationism and climate denial and anti-vax and all of the other conspiracy theories that go on here, and the deliberate misrepresentation of data and ignoring dozens of historians' testimony to say that Moses was not a historic character and shouldn't be in the history books as being the inspiration of the Ten Commandments, because he wasn't, and then they ignore everything that was said and put it in the history books anyway. These things are very frustrating to me. It's hard for me to it's hard for me to take the Christian perspective and call it values to begin with, but certainly not when they include things like honesty. But that's, as I said, just my opinion from personal experience. Somebody needs to follow that up rather quickly so I don't come out looking like a complete asshole.
Well, I know that, you know, here on the East Coast, my son has gone to the Camp Quest Chesapeake, and he's going to go again this year. And I think one of the biggest things, I mean, it was fun. Obviously, it's a lot of fun things for kids to do. He's 11 years old. But the biggest thing that he was impacted by was being able to go from a social unit at school in the 5th grade, where he does sometimes wear atheist T-shirts or secular T-shirts, and occasionally he gets a little bit of traction, a little bit of friction from that, but he never gets camaraderie, to going to a place where everyone does that, everyone has experienced that, everyone has camaraderie around things like that. And I mean, he made a really big point to talk about all that when he had come back from camp.
That is a really powerful thing about camp. And, you know, I see it. I'm often a cabin counselor at camp for the older girls. And what I see that I really love is them helping each other troubleshoot problems they're having at school or with friends or with extended family. You know, oh, my friend found out I was an atheist, and now she won't talk to me, and I don't know what to do about it. And another girl in the cabin will say, you know, I had that problem last year, and this is what I did about it, and my friend and I patched things up, and we had a good conversation. And so seeing kids have that peer-to-peer opportunity to know that they're not alone, to build that network of social support, is incredibly powerful. And, you know, people sometimes ask, well, it's only 1 week. What can you do in 1 week? And it is 1 week that sticks with these kids all year round. And parents tell us, you know, my kid can't stop talking about Camp Quest. They talk about it for months and months after they get back, and then, you know, months before camp, it's, when do I get to go back to camp? When do I get to go back to camp? And it's because of those friendships that they make, which really stick with them.
I have to say the same thing. I mean, I'm 52 years old, and I still remember going to summer camp when I was a little kid, in maybe 10, 12 years old, something in that area. And I remember 2 examples. One of them, I think, was in a relatively secular camp. It was one of those where one of the camp counselors let me reach my hand into an aquarium filled with tarantulas.
Cool.
Yeah, I thought that was terribly cool. And so as I'm letting this tarantula crawl up on my hand, I'm thinking, I'm all giddy with excitement because this is a real tarantula. It's the first time I've ever touched one, right? And this tarantula is now in my hand, and I'm all excited. And the guy says, now, you know they will bite, right? Yeah, thanks for telling me that now. Don't give me a warning in advance. But there was another camp that I went to that was a Christian camp that I went to on the invitation of a friend at that time. And as I said, I was about 12 years old then. And one of the things that bothered me about that camp was the faith-building exercises.
Mm-hmm.
One of which being just something that you had to jump off this pier without looking, because you had to have faith. And there's something about the way they presented that just sounded creepy to me, and I refused to do it because it sounded creepy. So as a consequence, if you don't have faith to jump off the pier without looking, then you don't get to swim beyond this little rope or what have you. And, you know, so that was what I gave up by not doing that. So they punish you for not having faith at the same time. So that was quite irritating. That was my camp experience.
Well, and that just strikes me as exactly the wrong lesson to teach kids at camp, right? The lesson you should be teaching kids at camp is to examine their environment, look for hazards, make good choices, be responsible, not jump off the pier without looking. You know, it's just like antithetical to the kinds of like safety protocols you would want your counselors to kind of be having, and you would want to teach your campers.
Yeah, well, I can't say that I've been involved in any kind of a religious institution or organization, any of the activities thereof, or programs that they've run, when there's ever been what I would recognize as practical wisdom or accurate information. So, I mean, this is why I'm, completely behind the whole Camp Quest thing. I'm really bothered at how here in Texas, particularly, and like with homeschool, for example. I mean, all of the packages that are available for homeschool teachers to build faith, which is exactly at the detriment of critical thinking and analysis. They don't want kids to analyze. They don't want them to scrutinize. They don't want them to doubt. They want them to do what they're told, believe what they're told, without reservation, without question, without reason. It's very confusing to me, but that's what they're promoting.
Yeah, we really do the exact opposite, and it's interesting because one of the questions that I get a lot about Camp Quest is, well, are you just the atheist equivalent of Jesus Camp? And the answer is no, nothing could be further from the truth, because I'm guessing this is the same thing with you guys as it is with me and most of the people I've met in the secular community. We came to these beliefs through a lot of asking questions, talking to people, reading, thinking, not because someone told us this is what we were supposed to believe. And we don't want anything less for our children. We want our children to have the same experience where they can develop critical thinking skills, ask questions, and come to their own conclusions using those tools, not just be atheists because your parents are atheists. So for us, camp is all about creating a safe environment for people to ask questions, develop critical thinking skills, and grow into adults, grow as people. And then, the worldview stuff comes along with that. We're not labeling the kids. We're really careful to say we're a camp aimed at kids from secular families, not a camp for secular kids. Because the kids, we don't know what labels they're going to embrace as they grow up, and we don't want to force a label on them just because that's what the adults in their lives choose to label themselves as. We want to let them know that, hey, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being an atheist. Here are awesome atheist role models. Here's a safe space to talk about your questions and doubts. But we don't want to force them to take on a belief just because that's their family's belief.
The first time we ever interviewed Zach Copeland on activism that he was involved with, I know that there was some people that were arguing with us at the time in that forum, and their arguments, for whatever reason, seemed to be based on whatever it was that Zach believed. Somehow or other, the information that he presented wasn't enough to attack or criticize or analyze. They needed to get him, and so they needed to know what his belief was first. Are you a Christian? Are you an atheist? They were very hard about this question, and I interrupted to say it doesn't matter.
Right.
Deal with the information he's presenting. Let's verify or validate or discredit that, regardless of what the source is. I just had a problem with that. Let me ask you, Amanda, have you already given pretty much everything you can think of as far as the events or the activities or any of the other things that go on at Camp Quest, or are there some others that have come to mind since the last couple of months?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure I could go on and on, but I guess there's a couple of stories that I just can't help but sharing. One is that there's an activity that we do at almost every Camp Quest location. Actually, I think all of our camps do this activity. And when I'm at camp, I often lead it, and it's Socrates Cafe. It's our philosophy discussion activity. And what I love about this is that it's this place where kids will talk and share ideas when you get the sense that maybe these are kids who are not the ones that are the first to speak up at school. And it's because so many times when adults are asking kids questions, the adult is saying, in effect, I have the answer in my mind, read my mind, and tell me the answer that I want to hear. And at Socrates Cafe, we're dealing with questions like, what is knowledge, what is beauty, what is friendship? And we set the tone. We tell the kids, the adults who are participating in this conversation, they don't know the answers either. Humans have been asking these questions for thousands of years. And we're not going to resolve this question in an hour, but we're going to become better questioners together. And giving kids a chance to engage with these big, meaty, abstract topics and really be listened to and taken seriously by adults it is so cool what comes out of that. I was at Camp Quest Chesapeake. I think it was their first summer, and this girl, she's 11. We're having this discussion, and just out of nowhere, she comes out with, "Don't you just think the world is made up of arguments?" And it just
Of what?
Of arguments. And it just, I mean, I just thought that was so cool, like such an interesting way to think about the world. And you know, and what's neat to me is how much the kids love Socrates Cafe. You ask the kids at the end of camp, you know, on a little evaluation survey or whatever, what were your favorite activities at camp? And right up there with swimming is Socrates Cafe. And you know, like a couple summers ago, I was at Camp Quest Arizona, and we had Socrates Cafe a few nights up against a couple of other different educational programs. The kids could pick which ones they wanted to go to. And then later in the week, we're supposed to have game night. Everyone's just supposed to play board games that night. And this girl in my cabin, she comes up to me and she says, "Amanda, I need you to think about saying yes to this. Don't just say no without thinking about it." And I'm like, oh gosh, what is this gonna be? And I said, okay, I'll think about it. And she says, "Some of us want to do Socrates Cafe tonight instead of going to game night. Would you run Socrates Cafe for us? If you know, for those of us who want to?" And I said, yeah, if you want to have philosophy discussion instead of going to game night, that's fine. We can totally make that happen. You know, so we spent 2 hours discussing what is progress, a topic that they picked, and I eventually had to send them to bed because the generator was going to be turned off for the night and the lights were going to go out.
That's an interesting topic. I have to bring up another one of my own anecdotes. For whatever reason, in the group that I grew up in, the people that surrounded me were more often than not against progress. I actually heard people preaching against the evils of progress, believe it or not.
That is really
a concept that has always baffled me, even when I was a child and I first heard it.
That's like the sign that said, remember, the first person to ask for equal rights was the devil.
Okay, so Amanda, while people are considering this information, I'm going to be putting links shortly after this the live show airs. If you're watching this on YouTube, there should be links down below. But Amanda, would you help people out on where they can go to donate?
Absolutely. So you can go to campquest.org and you'll see a big donate link there. That donates to our national efforts all over the country. Right now we have a $50,000 matching offer from the Stiefel Free Thought Foundation. And what we're working towards is our big Envision 2020 campaign, where by 2020 we want to have 2,000 campers. We had 1,000 campers last year in 2014, and we want to double in 5 years. So that's what we're working on at the national level. You'll also find links on that website, campquest.org, to volunteer and to register. And that'll take you to the websites of all of the different 18 weeks of camp that we're running around the U.S. this summer. And if you are a Texas listener, because I know that Aaron is very dedicated to Camp Quest Texas, campquesttexas.org, you can also donate to them, to their campership fund. They have a waiting list actually already for camp. They are full, but you can sign up to volunteer, fill out an application, and volunteer at camp. And I know Mark is a Camp Quest Chesapeake fan, so chesapeake.campquest.org. Yes. And you can support their campership fund. You can volunteer. You can register campers.
Is there any place in the country where Camp Quest is not represented? Any state?
Well, we don't have camps in every state yet. We have 18 locations. 18 weeks of camp in 16 different locations this summer. I think the place I would say that is furthest away from our camps right now, we don't have anything that close to Florida at this point, and that's a place that I would really like to see us expand. One thing, though, that I can tell people is we will pick you up at the airport. We will pick your camper up at the airport. We will pick volunteers up at the airport. You know, back in the day, back in 1996 when the first Camp Quest started, and for years after that, the only camp was in Ohio. And we had campers in Ohio from Japan, England, the Curacao Islands, Arizona, Colorado, Canada, everywhere you could imagine, and we just picked them up at the airport.
How do
So
you get international campers coming to? I get American campers going to Ohio, but then I'm spoiled. I was raised in Nevada, in Arizona, in New Mexico, Colorado. I'm usually by the idea of going camping in Ohio.
I,
I'm, but how do you get international campers coming to Camp Quest at all?
well, I mean, parents around the world said, hey, there isn't anything like this back home, and we really want our kids to have a chance to experience this. What we do at Camp Quest is pretty unique. So, we said, well, fill out the paperwork and we'll figure it out and make it happen. So, and we've had international volunteers at camp too, which has been really cool.
Excellent. So one of the places that you want to build on that you don't have a camp right now is Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really surprising to me because although I have had, I think I had a brilliant child. I got to do all kinds of amazing things when I was a kid. And I actually feel bad for my kids that they've had a relatively stable life adventures that I did. But I can see Florida as being a really fascinating place to go camping, like in the Everglades. Well, so somebody listening to this, maybe you can get something started. I don't know. How would somebody get something started in a place where there isn't already a Camp Quest set up?
That's a great question. And, one of the things we've been doing recently is actually changing the way we start new camps. We used to just kind of work with new groups and help them found completely new incorporated organizations with their own local boards. And we realized that eventually that model is going to become unsustainable. We can't be working with 200 different corporations running summer camps. So we're moving towards a regional model where there are different regions of the country, and those regions decide, hey, there's a lot of demand coming from this area. We have enough capacity to expand, to open a camp, down in this part of our region that's not being served very well yet. So that's kind of in flux a little bit right now. But the upshot is it doesn't change the first step that anyone should take who's interested in seeing a Camp Quest come to their area, which is go find the Camp Quest nearest to you and get involved as a volunteer at camp. Because there is absolutely no substitute for learning the ropes and how much work it takes and what goes into running a camp than actually being there on the ground, working with the kids, getting networked in with the organizers and the fellow volunteers at existing Camp Quest sessions. The way our whole network works is that people learn from each other. We have a leadership summit every year. The leaders of all the different camps, from cabin counselor level volunteers all the way up to camp directors, board chairs, come out and, when we have a camp location that's particularly awesome at something, they'll lead a session that other camps can learn from them on how to do a really great leadership track program for teens or things like that. So get involved as a volunteer, and that's kind of the first steps and the first starting point. Because I got to tell you, a lot of people contact us and say, I want to start a camp, and I kind of do the thing the rabbi is supposed to do when you try to convert to Judaism, which is they're supposed to turn you away 3 times. And it's because this is a huge amount of work. It is a huge commitment. And I don't want people to take on this kind of project without really understanding that it will eat your life. It'll be the best thing in your life, but it will eat your life.
I've had a couple of obsessions of that sort, but sometimes it's a good thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you don't have a camp in Florida. I'd like to ask you for 2 short lists, and I know I didn't give you any prep before this, so you can't be prepared for this question. But one, any other states where you don't have a camp that come to mind, and any that you're particularly proud of, or that are unique or particularly interesting?
Sure. I'm going to answer the second question first,
Okay.
because I like that question better. So I'm really one of our camps that I'm especially proud of is Camp Quest Smoky Mountains, because it meets in Smoky Mountains National Park. It's the second oldest camp in our network. They started in 2002, and having camp in Tennessee is an amazing experience. We get kids who they're being punished at school for not saying the Pledge of Allegiance. There's a lot of real prejudice these kids are facing. And so the kind of intensity of the community that the kids form at Camp Quest Smoky Mountains is really, really powerful, and it's in this amazingly beautiful national park setting. And so that's one of my particular loves. I'm really excited that Camp Quest Northwest is starting a second location in Oregon this year. Their first location is in Washington, and it's in Samish Island, Washington, which is between Seattle and Bellingham, and it's right on the coast. And so when I was there as a counselor, I looked out my cabin door, and there's Puget Sound.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, could anything be better than this? Like, this is amazing.
When I lived in Seattle as a high school kid, it was a 2-week. And I only lived there for the one summer, just before Mount St. Helens went off. But
oh, wow.
Where we lived in Kirkland, it was a 2-block walk to the bay where you can go swimming, or there was like a cove that you can go swimming in. But then there were ultralight aircraft in the air every day at that time, and there was also sailing ships. And I actually saw a brig. I mean, you occasionally see schooners and everything; those are common. But to see an actual brig, I mean, like a real pirate ship under sail, not just docked, but under sail. And when I came to Seattle area, the thing that I found most impressive about that was really, really majestic mountains, and everything was just ridiculously green. It's a rainforest, so everything is overgrown with wildlife everywhere. You actually need the machete to get through the underbrush, and I thought it was gorgeous. I thought it was really, really, really beautiful country, and water everywhere.
Yeah.
Oregon is much the same way. If you're lucky enough to be on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
The Oregon coastline is fantastic. I mean, the Seal Beach, all of the rocky structures out of the ocean, really good places to go camping.
Yeah. And then last summer was our first summer for Camp Quest Colorado, and I got to go on the zip line, which is always super fun, and just stare at the gorgeous Rocky Mountains while I was on the zip line.
Okay, so tell me about the zip line, please. Go a little more detail about that.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with, high ropes courses. You climb up this like kind of telephone pole tower, and then you're harnessed in, and you're wearing a helmet, and they clip you into this rope that attaches to a long metal cable, and then you jump off the platform. And
you get the impression that the helmet is like not a practical implement. What could the helmet possibly do at this altitude and at this speed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the helmet is maybe more going to protect you if something hits you on the head, something falls from the course, someone throws a rope down or something. But one thing that has been fascinating for me, a lot of camp activities, a lot of summer camps do this. They call it challenge by choice. So the idea is that you push your comfort zone, but you don't go crazy. So if you're super afraid of heights, maybe a challenge by choice thing for you is to go up to the climbing wall and put both hands on the climbing wall and put both feet on the bottom footholds. And maybe that's your challenge. If you're somebody who's super comfortable with heights, maybe your challenge is to get all the way to the top. Well, for me, it took me years to go up on the ropes course. And I was always like, oh, well, let the kids go. I don't need to go. I'll hang back. I'll let everyone else go first. Because it's not because I'm scared. No. But going up there, what really helped me get comfortable with it was the data. I'm like, it was way more dangerous for me to drive my car to camp than it is to be up here. You look at the statistics. The thing that you do every day that's the most dangerous is getting in your car. And it's like, well, I'm not afraid of getting in my car. And, I trust the data. So, I know they've done all these safety protocols, they've done all this testing, they've got all this training. I'm going to be okay up here. And that's actually what got me comfortable with the ropes course.
Yeah, I had a lot of people tell me that getting into a car is about the most dangerous thing you do. Maybe that's why I ride a motorcycle.
I think that one's worse.
Okay, let me ask you a personal question then.
Sure.
This show, what I like to do, what I prefer to do every episode whenever I can, is I want to focus on people that are motivated to make a progressive change, who want to improve the situation. And so I want to know personally, how did you become involved in this? You mentioned that this is going to eat up your life and that it'll be the best part of your life, but how did it become a part of your life? What was the motivation there?
Sure. So there's maybe two parts to this story. I was raised in a mixed religious family. My mom is Lutheran, my dad's not religious, and that was a big source of conflict in my family growing up because religion just never made sense to me. I went to church, I went to Sunday school, I asked all these questions, and it just never took. And for my mom, that was really hard for her because she felt like she was somehow, failing in her duty as a parent. And so that religious tension was a really important part of my childhood, and I started calling myself an atheist at about age 13. But then, I went off to college, and in college, nobody's really paying that much attention to religion. Especially, I went to Brown University, and it was, just super liberal, all these other things going on, and I didn't really realize that there was an organized atheist community, and that there was a way to be an atheist with other people. I thought it was just, you come to this conclusion that, there's no God, and then, you go on and you do other things. And I moved to Columbus for graduate school, and I actually met August Brunsman, who's the executive director of the Secular Student Alliance, through online dating, of all places, and found out that there's this whole movement, there's this whole community, and there's this thing called humanism. And I had no idea.
You didn't know about humanism?
No, not until I met August. And, so this is 2003, and August tells me, I volunteer at the summer camp. It's called Camp Quest. And Edwin and Helen Kagan, who were amongst the group that founded Camp Quest back in 1996, they were coming through Columbus, and August said, come have dinner with Edwin and Helen. They're characters. You'll have a good time. And Edwin said, well, you're coming to camp, right? And I said, well, I was going to go visit my family. He said, well, your family's there every week. Camp's only 1 week. You're coming to camp. So in 2003, I wound up at camp as a volunteer, and I just got hooked.
Ed Kagan told you to.
Oh yeah.
That's up.
And that is how so many people got involved in this thing. Is Edwin said, well, you're doing this. And then I joined the board, and we had more camps starting around the country, and they weren't really coordinating with each other. They were all, in their parts of the country doing their own thing, and I'm just like, why are we all reinventing the wheel? This is dumb. So, we started getting a coordinating call together. And then, I wrote a grant to the Institute for Humanist Studies, and we formed this national organization, and, here I am as executive director. So I was involved for, 2003 through 2007 as a volunteer, and then became our first paid staff member in 2008.
I didn't know for the longest time if I was a humanist. I had been accused of being a humanist for as long as I could remember. I remember that when I was 11 years old, that some adult woman was asking me questions about my beliefs. And I had been raised in a religious background. I mean, that was all I knew. For all I knew, I was a Christian. And
right.
Because everybody else in my family wasn't, because they all told me that God was a conclusively proven scientific fact, and that Jesus was a character out of confirmed history and all of that. And there's no point in trying to question these things. I didn't even know that you could question these things, or that anybody would. But in this woman asking me questions about what I believed or why, she said, "Well, you're a humanist." And I remember I had to go, ask my family, what is a humanist? Because this person said that I'm a humanist, and they said, "You're not a humanist. You're a Mormon." Okay. Which I also, when the funny thing is that when they told me I'm not a humanist, okay, I'll believe that you when you say I'm not a humanist. When they say, but the reason that I'm not a humanist is because I'm a Mormon, I didn't want to correct my family that I don't consider myself Mormon. And the reason that I didn't, and I'm going to be talking about this in Europe next week, the reason that I didn't is because I didn't know what it was that Mormons believe. Just because I'm born into a Mormon family doesn't mean that I'm automatically Mormon. I have to know what the whole doctrine is. How do I know that it all applies to me? And apparently that is one of the indicative factors of being a humanist that I was skeptically thinking. So I seem to be kind of a freak in my family. So so you were invited into doing this thing by Ed Kagan, and you described a couple of the camps that you have in Tennessee. Which, by the way, having driven through Tennessee a couple of times and remarking on the scenery, yeah, I can see that. I did ask you about other states where you didn't have camps, and I'd like to just kind of throw that out there for people, for anybody that might be interested and might not know that there's a camp in their area. Maybe you've got some natural resources in your area that would serve well for that.
Yeah, so we as we build this Envision 2020 plan, one of the things that we want to do is we want to serve the most major cities in America with a camp within 3 hours of where they are. And so that would mean opening another camp location in Texas. That would mean a camp probably in New Mexico. That would mean more camps in the Northeast. You know, right now Camp Quest New England meets in Connecticut, but we don't have anything really sort of north or east of there. And so, you know, basically what we're doing is we're sort of looking to see where we have the most demand and trying to expand in those areas. So Camp Quest Texas is really interested in going to 2 weeks, and they're preparing to do that because, I mean, when you're going to a waiting list within 72 hours of opening registration and your waiting list is almost as big as the number of people who actually get to go to camp, there's a huge unmet need in Texas. So that's another area we're prioritizing, even though we have a session there already.
I want to ask another question then, because, you know, Texas is a gigantic state. You're talking about opening another camp in Texas, and you said that it's already full up, right? What are the limits on the number of kids that can go? Is it just the campsite itself? Is that the limit?
So it's a few things. So at some camps, it's the campsite. For example, Camp Quest Minnesota expanded to 2 weeks because their host camp really only fits 50 kids. And they really like their host camp. They want to stay there. So now instead of running one 50-kid session, they run 2 week-long sessions with 50 kids each. For other camps, their physical facility could hold more kids, but they need more volunteers in order to keep a proper supervision ratio and run a proper camp. So sometimes...
Do you happen to know off the top of your head which of the places that need more volunteers?
Yeah, absolutely. Camp Quest Oklahoma definitely is looking for volunteers. Camp Quest Minnesota is looking for volunteers. Most of our sessions are still accepting volunteer applications at this point in the year.
Don't mind asking, in the case of Oklahoma and Minnesota, where is the camp?
Sure. Camp Quest Minnesota is really close to the Twin Cities. It's just west of Minneapolis, about 30 minutes. So that's a really easy camp to fly to because you can fly into a really major airport. Camp Quest Oklahoma is it's in eastern Oklahoma. It's between it's not that far from Tulsa.
Okay.
So that would be like the airport you would fly into if you would fly in.
I was just thinking if anybody happens to be listening that might want to do that. So when are the camps run typically?
We run all summer. The first camp of the summer this year is, let me actually look. It is in Arizona, and it's June 7th through the 13th. So that's the first week that school is out, pretty much, and that'll vary in different parts of the country. You know, in New York State, they're going to school through the end of June. And then we have camp basically every week somewhere in the U.S. through about the 3rd week in August. The last camp of this summer is, I think, yeah, Camp Quest Northwest is in Washington State is the last week of the summer, and that is August 9th through the 15th.
Where is your camp in Arizona?
It is, it's awesome actually. It is not that far from Prescott, and it's about 6,000 feet of elevation. It's on Mingus Mountain. So even though it's 115 degrees in Phoenix, it is beautiful, beautiful weather up at camp because, you know, as you go up into the mountains, it cools way down. So we did a sleep out.
Not that this matters to anybody, but, you know, having grown up in those western states in the Four Corners area, Arizona is, a lot of people have no idea what all is in Arizona. It's a really fantastic state.
Yeah, I love it there, and their campground is really cool because it's up in the mountains. It's very like rustic. Like I said before, it runs off this generator, and so, you know, at 10 p.m. the lights go out and they don't go on in the morning until morning, except for the first aid cabin. The first aid cabin is powered by a solar cell. And so they actually have power all night. They charge the batteries during the day and it runs all night. So, you know, if you need medical care, we got you covered with some electricity and that sort of thing. But it's we had a sleep out when I was at Arizona a couple summers ago, and you don't think like, oh, I'm going to get cold in Arizona in the summer. I had like 3 pairs of socks on and like practically every article of clothing that I had brought with me, and I'm like in my sleeping bag, like with my hood up on my hoodie, and I woke up in the morning like freezing.
Well, that's one of the things about a dry climate. You know, I mean, I lived quite a long time in Arizona, and I noticed that once the sun disappears on the other side of the mountain, and yes, they have real mountains.
Oh yeah.
Once the sun disappears on the other side of the mountain, it's immediately 10 degrees colder, and just continues to get colder every hour after that. So it's because there's no retention, there's no moisture in the atmosphere. It will be quite cold by the time the sun comes back up again.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one more question. What is your favorite memory or memories of camp? Either, not just with Camp Quest, but I also want to know about other camps you went to as a kid yourself.
Wow. Oh, camps I went to as a kid. Well, okay, so camps I went to as a kid, I went to a Lutheran summer camp a couple times as a kid, and you know, most of it was fun except for when they made us do Bible study, which was not as fun. But one of the things we did was we got to go, they called it polar bearing in the lake, so like if you got up early before everybody else, you know, there was like an early wake up, and you'd go out to the lake and you'd all jump in the lake first thing in the morning, and it was freaking freezing, but we felt so like, you know, awesome. And so like, you know, there was kind of this thing, if you did that like every day during the week, you know, you were like in like the polar bear club and stuff. So that was really fun when I was a kid at camp. My my favorite memory from Camp Quest, and it's hard to choose, but we when I was at Camp Quest Northwest in Washington, this was 2012, we're sitting around the campfire at night, and one of the counselors looks up and points out, oh, the International Space Station is going by overhead. And, you know, how many of you, how familiar everyone is with teenagers. But teenagers really little. They don't want to show that something impresses them, you know, at all. And I watched right in front of me, this teenage camper turn to his friend and just no.
Amanda, you seem to have timed out on me. You seem to have frozen.
Yep. I still have you good, Aaron. One thing I would say about Camp Quest is that when, like I said, when we went and picked up our son from there, it was a lot of kids giving the old, you know, I'm not ready to go home, but it was a lot different feeling when they got dropped off. They got dropped off, and it was, if it was their first time, they were apprehensive, and then at the end of camp, it was like a lot of them didn't want to even head out. So, I mean, that's proof of a powerful experience, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for that, Mark. And Amanda, I'm sorry that you started to give me this this nice story and everything, and suddenly your computer seemed to have bogged down.
Oh, yeah, it must not want me to tell the story. Well, so I don't know how much of the story you heard, but we were sitting around the campfire, and this counselor points out the space station, the International Space Station, going by overhead. Who are sitting right in front of me, who, they have that teenage thing that they're doing where they're trying to be cool. There's this moment where the one turns to the other one.
That is so irritating when kids do that. Boy, I bought my son a Harley Sportster when he was 14 years old, and he wanted to be so cool by showing me how much he didn't appreciate that. Oh, irritating.
What happened is this kid turns to his friend, and he just says, "There are people up there." And it's just this moment of completely unguarded awe in his voice. And just seeing kids have that moment of awe and wonder at the world around them and forget for a minute to try to be cool and seem unimpressed is really, I don't know, that'll stick with me for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Mark, did you ever go to camp as a kid?
Yeah, I did. I went to Christian summer camp every year from about 8 years old until I was about 14. I really liked it a lot. I remember being into the church part, but I really liked all the other stuff too. I actually went to a camp called Portage Lake Covenant Bible Camp. It's still around if anybody wants to Google it. And it was on the coast of Lake Michigan, in the middle part of Michigan. And it was really fun. I had a lot of good times there. I don't know, I can't think of anything that I thought was bad. I mean, even looking back, there wasn't like a fire and brimstone hate style indoctrination. I mean, I remember, doing all the stuff and singing and whatnot, but it was just a good time to me. But there's chapel every day and stuff like that. So, of course, you do have some indoctrinating and some brain waves heading in the direction of church. But it was all right. I would say that I don't think it damaged me. I mean, I seemed to grow up all right. So I think I got lucky on the like guilt side of it.
Okay, then Amanda, let me ask you: do you have Camp Quest in California or Hawaii?
We don't have Camp Quest in Hawaii. That might be another good place to start a camp. We have 2 Camp Quest sessions in California. Camp Quest West runs a session in Wrightwood, California, which is it's a kind of near a ski area that's just north of LA. And their other session is near Sacramento. It's in Nevada City, California. So whether you're in Northern California or Southern California, you can get to Camp Quest West.
When I went to camp, the Christian camp that I told you about earlier, that was actually on Catalina Island.
Oh!
One of the cool things about Catalina Island is that they have a herd of bison, and we had to do this hiking trek to a point in the island where you can see the ocean on both sides, and that took us right through the middle of a bison herd. And imagine I'm a 12-year-old kid, and bison are pretty big, so I was impressed that I was walking amongst these animals staring me down. And the better part of that was that the kids that were allowed to swim in the unrestricted area because they did the thing where they jump off the pier without looking, they were allowed to go spearfishing, snorkeling with swim fins out in the open area. And some of them were run off or when it was a report of a great white. But being able to explore the tide pools, and somebody actually pulled up a moray eel and brought it on shore. One of the kids that we were camping with pulled up a moray eel, and I had to help kill this thing. They're really tough, horrible, evil things. But that I thought was an interesting thing to experience at camp. You know, snorkeling around the tide pools in an area that's shark infested and has covered in seals. That was good. That was pretty neat.
It's interesting you mentioned Catalina Island because the camp director for one of the Camp Quest West sessions in California, he's also the vice chair of our national board for Camp Quest. His name is Neil Polzin, and he was an Eagle Scout, and then he was kicked out of the Boy Scouts of America because he was active in the secular community. He started a Secular Student Alliance chapter on his campus as an undergrad, and so he lost his job with the Boy Scouts. He was a waterfront director at their summer camp, which I believe was on Catalina Island. And so, you know, we just have been talking about this because both Neil, our vice chair, and Sean, the chair of the Camp Quest board, Sean Jeffers, are Eagle Scouts who were kicked out of the Boy Scouts due to their discriminatory policies. And so, you know, what I like to tell people is, it sucks that the Boy Scouts discriminates, but their loss is our gain. You know, these great leaders that develop these skills in the Boy Scouts, now, because the Boy Scouts decided that people who don't believe in God can't be the best kind of citizens, they come to Camp Quest and we benefit from all their expertise.
Yeah, outstanding. So the things that I look for when I go to a camp when I was a kid, the things that I wanted to do most: horseback riding and either canoeing or kayaking. You know those little small plastic kayaks?
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to do that. So I would guess that probably all of your camps do one or both of these things, don't they?
I don't think all of them offer them, but we definitely have a few camps that offer horseback riding. That is getting more difficult to find at summer camp for liability reasons. But Camp Quest Texas and Camp Quest Michigan both definitely offer horseback riding. There may be other locations that have horseback riding that I'm not thinking of right now. Lots and lots of our camp sessions offer canoeing and kayaking. I think the most fun kayaking I had was at Camp Quest Northwest in Washington, because there you are right on the Sound and you get to go kayaking, which is pretty cool. But yeah, most of our camps you can do canoeing or kayaking. Camps that don't have that, a lot of them have climbing wall and or high ropes challenge courses, which are very popular other high adventure activities that a lot of the kids are really excited about.
Okay. All right. Well, Amanda, that was I think it was a pretty good rundown. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I want you to tell me whatever it is you haven't said already that you need to get out before the end of the show, if you can.
Oh my goodness. Well, I guess want to remind people again of the website, campquest.org. And, you know, we can't do this without you, without the Free Thought community. And what amazes me is we had over 400 volunteers last summer who made these camps happen. And I think those volunteers, you know, they get involved and they come back to camp year after year because of what it gives them. You know, before I was talking about this will eat your life, but it'll be the best week of your life. And it's one of the things, I guess, that keeps me really excited and passionate about Camp Quest is the mentoring that I see happening and the personal growth of, you know, you build this place where people feel safe and belong, and then they become these amazing leaders who they didn't know they could be. And it's everyone from the youngest camper dealing with homesickness to the end of the week when they don't want to leave, to, you know, to me, to the chair of our board, to people who started out as campers and now they're camp directors with us. And that is, I don't know, that's the thing that really grabs me about what we do.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Mark, did you have anything you needed to say?
No, I don't. I just thanks for coming on, Amanda. I really appreciate it. And you're going to be in Pennsylvania, right?
Oh yeah, I will be at the Pennsylvania Atheist and Humanist Convention.
We'll all be there, all of us.
It'll be super fun. And Mark is going to be emceeing the convention, and it's in September. And
Yep.
I think the website is atheistpa.org. And so
Yes.
you should go there and register for the convention and come.
And we'll be doing a live podcast from there as well.
Fun. That'll be cool.
Yeah, and I got to say that the next episode of the Raw Man podcast is also going to be live from London, where I will be interviewing the mind behind the design for the PhylogonyExplorer.com. It is actually a thing.
Finally, it's finally a thing.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We're going to be rolling out, or at least we're ready for all of the data entry personnel to start, plugging in the information to build it up. But the structure is there, and all of that. We can't unveil it yet. It's going to be some time while we build that up. But that's who we're going to be talking to in 2 weeks' time. And I also want to brag just for a moment, because we would check every now and again on Spreaker to see where the Raw Men podcast was fitting up according to everything else, and for the longest time it was like number 7 in the culture category, number 4 in the religious category, or whatever. But at the moment, right now, it's number 1 on both categories. So I'm really impressed with that. I'm surprised, but I'm pleasantly surprised.
It didn't even take us a whole year, Aaron. We got it there in less than a year.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it down, and good night, everyone.